Would you like to say your name?
Katie Hall.
Thanks, guys. So, Katie was set a question by Monique, which she is going to read out now.
Services manager is already a very well-established role. Do you believe it is more important to develop and expand services further or maintain a high level of quality throughout?
So, I should probably say thank you first. So, thank you to everyone that I've canvassed this week. It's been great to listen to you, especially as a second year living out of college. It's quite hard to know how services have been running this year. The food's been great. It's sometimes difficult to know how things have been on the ground. So it's been really good to talk to people in college. And yeah, thanks for being here too. So the question, I think it says it in the question really. It's a very established role. And sometimes as university students, we're young, we're creative, we've got loads of energy, we think, okay, let's revolutionise everything. Let's use loads of money and let's make changes. For example, I was racking my brains as to what you do to further services as a role. Potentially you could spend money on the JCR, try and make a fantastic space as good as the MCR. I was thinking maybe you could set aside a space for ironing. I know that sounds really dull, but it's a pet hate of a lot of people. You could spend money in the JCR especially, new sofas. These are all very valid suggestions, and we should definitely endeavour to make good changes where we can. But in the question, it's an established role for a reason. We hate to admit it, but if a kettle doesn't work and you can't make a cup of tea, it's really quite annoying. And especially as second years come back into college, if washing's not working properly, it just makes the whole day that bit more annoying. So I think this is an established role for a reason, because the things that services manager has to contend with, which is making sure these things work, is actually really important. And I know taking on this role, I'm so aware of how responsible I'll be for making sure your daily lives and your time in college just run as well as it possibly can. I think it's also important to not try and expand yourself too well and maintain high standards, because this is such an unpredictable role. If I had to bet the challenges I could have next year if I was to be elected, I just couldn't. 2 years ago, the issues were about making formals the right price. This year, Monique's had such difficult tasks trying to make formal sign-up okay. And so, I think if you try and spread yourself too thin, actually, you might not be able to focus on the things that really matter. So, if College Office were to approach the services manager next year and say, we've got to raise the price of formal, you've got to know that your services manager is going to put all their effort, time and resources into making sure that just doesn't happen. So, I think in answering this question, I would be very firmly against trying to expand the services too far and just maintaining a high quality. And I think that's something I've reiterated as much as I possibly can through canvassing. I think the opening statement I've said to most people is that I wouldn't try and revolutionise this role, I'd just try and do it well and get the trust in the people to know it will be done to a high standard. If that's 2 minutes.
Yeah, clear enough. Excellent. So do we have any questions? Jonathan.
The contract for the JCR website is up for renewal next year.
Yeah.
Do you think we should continue with the same company?
The contract for the JCR website is up for renewal this year. Do you think we should continue with the same company?
So in terms of the website, we pay a lot of money for a service at the moment, and it's not necessarily delivering in every way it needs to. I've always thought one of the really important things about a website is when a fresher comes to college, they're going to look at it, see which societies are on there, look at some exact photos, and it does perform services like that. And I also think the website's great for when people need to sign up for packed lunch. They brought it in about a year ago, and I think that made it so much easier. But if we're paying a lot of money for something that doesn't help us, we've got to consider where we're putting our funds. One thing that we spend a lot of money on at the moment with the website is to run an event engine. I'm sure everyone in this room has contended that this year, because formal sign-up on it just hasn't worked, and we've had to use an external link. For that reason, if we're paying money into something that's just not fulfilling its purpose, we definitely should consider other avenues. There's loads of really talented computer science students out there. We're not necessarily harnessing them enough. So, in going back to the question, I definitely think if it's coming to its end, we should be exploring other opportunities, but not forgetting that it does perform some services for us. and yeah, where appropriate, we should be spending our money wisely. I think that's really important.
Excellent. Any other questions? Yes.
The gap between like livers in and livers out for fees is quite high, which may be legitimate. But what would you do? And occasionally it might kind of make people not want to get involved in college as much. So what would you do to actually make people give a shit?
Or maybe we word that one. So there was a bit of a question about the gap in cost between livers out and livers in terms of formals, and how you can adjust to get more engagement from the livers out.
So I'll try and answer that question in two parts. I think we have to remember that obviously there is a tight budget, and at the moment the JCR is putting a lot of money into trying to keep those prices down as much as we possibly can. In that respect, I do think there's a limit to how much we can change the pricing, and I think the fact that the pricing of the livers out formal closely resembles how much livers out might try and budget for their food, I don't think we're going too far wrong. But having said that, in terms of trying to encourage them in, I know they've been looking at the livers out brunch as much as possibly can, and I think at the moment it actually turns out more expensive for a livers out to go to a livers out brunch than to just go to a normal brunch. And so I guess making sure you guys think there's value for money would be a way of trying to make sure the livers out actually want to spend that much. Whether this means we need to talk to you guys and find out what you actually think of the food, if you're not prepared to pay that much money because you don't think the food you're getting is worthy of it. So in trying to make sure the livers out actually do care and actually do want to come in, I think it's making sure you guys know what you're going to get for what you pay for. Everyone likes to come into formal because they're going to see their friends, and I would hope you wouldn't put a price on that, but definitely making sure you think that £5 that you spent is better spent in college than spent elsewhere, I think is a reflection of the food. Potentially for, well, I don't know, I just think value for money. If we need to improve the food, perhaps potentially that's one reason, one avenue we could go down. Livers out brunch, that's another option, but as again, it's too expensive at the moment. Yeah, I think just try maybe an improvement of food, because sometimes the portions aren't particularly great. Maybe we could expand the choice of alcohol. I don't profess that's necessarily a possibility. Whether we could work the price of alcohol, I don't know, but just trying to make you guys feel like you're going to pay for something and it's worth coming to would be really important.
Okay. Yes.
What involvement do you see the role having with the Toasty Bar, and how do you work with the Toasty Bar managers to improve the Toasty Bar?
Okay. Question from the Toasty Bar manager. What involvement do you see the role having with the Toasty Bar, and what are you going to do in terms of working with the Toasty Bar managers next year?
So I think the Toasty Bar is a very big part of the role. Everyone loves to come into college because they know they're going to get a good value toasty, it's going to make their night maybe, people come in, they're not even coming into college for any other reason but to have a toasty. Loads of other people in other colleges don't have a Toasty Bar, and they're like, oh my goodness, fantastic, you've got one. So I do think it's really important that service maintains. I think one way I'd want to work with the Toasty Bar is trying to make it as self-sufficient and profit-making as possible. I don't for 1 second suggest that it should be a profit-making machine, because if you try and make too much profit, you're potentially going to have to raise prices, which no one would want, and you're going to try and just not focus on providing a really nice service for people. So I think I would work with the Toasty Bar to make sure that it's just self-sufficient potentially, and yeah, so it's making enough funds not to rely too much on the JCR. In terms of communication and making that happen, I think it's just regular communication, and I would want to know the smallest issues, from toasting machine not working to needing a new recycling bin to the ventilation's rubbish. We need to talk to estates and buildings, just close communication. I think it's really great that you guys have got like your t-shirts now, making sure you feel as included in the whole JCR as other committees, I think is really important. So yeah, close communication and making sure you feel like there are funds available if you certainly need them. But where possible, I think it should be self-sufficient and you should get the publicity you need to. But I think it's a vital part of college, and we might look at the bar, we might look at the Undy, but I think Tasty Bar does create a lot of what people like about college too.
Great.
Yes, Will.
If you could be a snack in the vending machine, what would you do and why?
Excellent. If you could be a snack in the vending machine, what would you be and why?
It's a difficult question because there's such a good choice. It's probably one of the more difficult questions, to be honest. Without sounding really boring, I think I'd probably just go for like a Cadbury Dairy Milk. Someone's quite happy about that. Purely because I just think that's the go-to. And if you wanted one thing in a vending machine, like, I think you guys would be lying if you didn't all say that's the one thing you'd want to be in there. I think I'd say that.
Good stuff. Polly.
Have you got any services-related jokes?
Have you got any services-related jokes? That's a brutal question.
In true bar style, I don't know if it's necessarily services related, so I could just pretend I don't have one, but I'm not going to. I do have a joke, you don't have to laugh. So this kid threw a block of cheddar at me the other day. I didn't think that was very mature.
Took a while for that to get picked up. Johnny Harbord.
Do you think that the exec should get free formals?
Do you think that the exec should get free formals?
Judging by the reaction of the room, that was clearly quite contentious. And I do think it's a contentious issue because at the end of the day, everyone else in college is paying, and ultimately the exec are having a very similar experience. And we're all students, we're all from a similar background, but I do think that the exec perform a really valuable role in college, and especially in first term when they're introducing themselves to freshers, when they're being a friendly face in the evenings, after the formal and the Undy, I do think they have a really important presence, and you can't forget how much they're not sacrificing, but how much they are involved in college. And for that reason, maybe I'm controversial, but I'm going to say I do think they deserve that position. I think potentially you could question whether it's fair that they always get onto the special formals. That's potentially a different discussion. But I do think they perform a really important role in college, and I think to sacrifice that amount of money is not significant.
Okay. Yes, Will.
If you were to get the role, you wouldn't just be services manager, but you'd be a member of the exec as well. What would you bring to the exec?
If you were to get the role, you wouldn't just be services manager, you'd also be a member of the executive. What would you bring to the executive as well?
I think there are a number of different things I'd bring. I could go into a lot of detail about each, but I'll try and be brief. I've had a lot of involvement in university level sport, and I think as a college that is so full of talented people, it's sometimes hard to keep track of all what these people are doing. And certainly with my perspective of having not been on the periphery, but having been very involved in university things, I certainly have a perspective for the needs of lots of different people in college and how we can look upon college from outside. Having said that, as in a more personable kind of what are my characteristics like, I have to say I'm extremely organised, and I would hope that my ability to run services would be not, I can't even think of the opposite, detrimental, but it would work really well with other colleges, because if I run my service as well, I can hopefully make sure that other execs positions are having just, that I'm not inflicting I've got tongue-tied. I would hope that if I can run services well, I can then support all the other exec roles. So if formals are running well, it makes everyone's job easier. I like to think as a person that I'm very approachable and I like to help people out, whether this be having tried to umpire college hockey matches, trying to get involved where I possibly can, taking And so in that sense, I think I would have a lot of spare time to help people with their issues. I've answered this question so badly, by the way, I'm so apologetic. But in general, I just think being approachable, having a perspective from a university-wide involvement, and just generally trying to be a fun character and health involved.
Okay. Well, if we go for 2 more questions. Elizabeth.
The services manager is responsible for the upkeep of a lot of the things in the physical JCR, such as the television, the Xbox, making it like a useful space. However, apart from like stowing your gown after formal or just kind of showing the space, almost no one uses it. What changes do you make to the JCR room to make it more of a central space for college?
What changes would you make to the JCR room, physical room, to make it more of a used space within college?
I think this is an interesting question because people use the JCR room for many different reasons, as you've outlined. But I think the one bugbear I've had with the JCR, and I hope is shared by quite a lot of people, is actually just the conditions it's kept in. If you go in there, quite often it's last night's, whatever was happening last night is quite evident, or the room just generally isn't kept very tidy, it's in a bit of disrepair. So I think it's quite important to maintain actually just the standard of the space, and I'd hope by maintaining the standard of the space, people are actually more inclined to use it, because then you know you're not going in there and to use it, you're going to have to start by clearing up the space. So I think in order to make sure it's a space that's tidy, you just need to be monitoring it more quickly, more often. That would involve making sure the West Courtyard reps are doing their job, whether that be the services managers pop their head around the door more often, whether you need to pay some money to sort the storage system out. There are some rooms beyond the JCR which have kind of poorly stored things at the moment. If you could sort out the storage there in general, get some of the clutter out of the JCR, hopefully just be a better space in general. I could suggest spending loads of money. I don't know, people have suggested this week maybe a table tennis table. Like, there obviously are other uses of that space, but sometimes you just want a clean, tidy space where you can just chill out, have a conversation. So I'm not sure that I would necessarily try and revolutionise it. I'm just trying to keep it clean, tidy and usable, and hopefully that would make it popular.
Good stuff. And we have our last question. Right. So that question, which I'm hopefully you'll remember correctly, was about the gym. What we're going to do to make the gym more used. Yeah.
So I think there are a number of different things you can do here. One of the things in my manifesto is about access to the gym. Trying to not ramble on too much, it's just about the fact we have to collect keys. Porters don't necessarily know who's actually in there, and it basically leads to a situation where people begrudge having to collect keys because the porters don't know they're in there anyway, and their keys get lost. Freshers have been jumping through the windows quite recently. They've lost the keys. Vergers have begrudged the fact that the freshers are doing all of this. And so in general, like, access to the gym, I do think is one issue. So that's one thing I'd tackle. I think we can learn a lot from other colleges. So for example, it might be the way they open their they open their gym, whether they have double campus card swiping locks, obviously expensive. But because the gym is being improved, there's no reason why we potentially shouldn't invest in how we access it too. So access would be one thing, and if we can get a proper system for accessing it where you don't have to go to the porters, lie about who's going to come with you, and then lose the key afterwards, I think that would be one thing. Secondly, the second thing, it sounds like I'm a really big issue, it's not that much of an issue. The second thing would just be about the space in general. So trying to make sure we've got the equipment in there that people really want to have. So girls quite often suggest they want more mats on the floor. I know squat racks, or I think an Olympic bench press or something, like making sure the stuff that goes in there is the stuff you really want. And I think one way you'd achieve that is not just trying to go to a JCR meeting and say, okay everyone, what do you want in the gym? Because quite often when you're not in the gym, you kind of just say whatever you fancy. You might never even lift a weight, but you suggest, oh, I think we should have some more weight. And you might not actually get the views of people that use the gym often. So I think one thing you can do is having a sign-up sheet in the gym which just says, you know guys, you're the people that use it often, write on here what you really want us to have in here. So trying to find out what equipment people actually want would be something as well. And then I think thirdly, talking to the gym, talking to the gym reps enough
to know that your space is being used properly, so that people feel like they can go there. Again, after tidying before they use it, the equipment's going to be functioning. I think there's nothing more annoying than finally saying, like, okay, I'm actually going to go on a cycle bike, whatever, and then realising if it wasn't working, like, that would be so depressing. So, like, making sure the equipment's running, making sure you can access it well, and making sure the equipment in there is the stuff you want to use. Because fundamentally, you don't want anything too complicated for the gym. You just want equipment that's going to try and hopefully make you a bit fitter.
Excellent stuff. And if you'd just like to say your name again.
Yeah, it's Katie Moore. Thank you.
Great. So if we'd like to give our candidate a round of applause.